So what is she studying over there?
She is actually doing a PhD in clinical psychology.
Oh, I see. Okay. Excellent. Brilliant.
Mhm.
That's
We are
great.
live.
Okay, so we are live. So namaste,
Mhm.
Dr. Prabha, and welcome to
Namaste, Jerry.
the Rex Karmaveer Global HR OD Fellowship Conversations. We have with us our colleague and associate, JC Desai.
Mhm.
And namaste, JC. Namaste to you too.
Yeah, namaste. Hi.
Yes. So, Dr. Prabha, it is a pleasure and an honor having you with us. You've done remarkable work in the field of HR and learning, and I know your resume and your profile is very interesting. So, I just wanted to just straight away jump in, by asking you a simple question: what inspires you to work in the field of HR? What is the inspiration behind that?
Sure. Thank you, Jerry. And I'm actually honored and very excited to be part of your event today.
Yes. Thank
So,
you.
yeah, uh, I basically started out doing my master's in psychology. And
Right.
I think what drew me to the field itself is my interest in studying human behavior.
Right.
Human behavior is fascinating, actually.
Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
and if you look at it, you can go two routes in that. You can either go into studying into working in organizations, or you can go into clinical practice.
Right.
So
Right.
I was very interested in studying human behavior in organizations, and I
Right.
basically call myself a behavioral scientist.
Right.
You can learn about human behavior by observing a lot, but of
Right.
course, a course in psychology helps.
Right.
It's icing on the cake. So that's how I got into HR. It's fascinating. It doesn't matter what you're doing in HR, as long
Right.
as you're working with people. There's so much to observe, so much to learn, and so much
Absolutely.
to uh,
Absolutely.
train
Yes.
people in.
And you did a course from SHRM is what I noticed in your profile.
Yes, I did my human resources management from
Right.
SHR
Right.
in the USA. Yeah.
And how was that experience learning from the people at SHRM, because they are the premier institution on promoting best practices in HR?
Yeah. It was quite a long time ago, so, but it was interesting. I think that what was actually fascinating was the difference. Having come in from India, I
Right.
knew HR in India,
Right.
and I was looking at HR over here.
Right.
So there are a lot of differences between the way they approach HR here and the way they approach it there. I mean, this was 20 years ago.
Right.
Now, of course, that difference is no longer there because
Right.
information is available to everybody.
Right.
So it was very interesting to understand how HR works in the
Right.
United States.
Right.
It's a lot about legal stuff,
Right.
so you have to know the legalities here very clearly
Right.
before you get into HR. That is one big
Absolutely. Absolutely.
um, difference that I saw then.
Right. And what is the basic difference that you saw 20 years ago? And how have you seen that kind of petering down and narrowing down when you said that there's not much difference now? How would you kind of rationalize that thought?
So those days it took a lot of convincing for people to make people understand that they need organization development.
Right.
If an organization has to grow,
Right.
it has to take the people along with it.
Right.
You cannot simply grow in terms of finances without taking your people along with it.
Right.
And those days it took a lot of convincing the managers, top managers, saying that you need this. And,
Right.
nowadays I feel with so much information available on the internet and so many different theories that people have come up with, people understand the value of how important it is to take your people along with you.
Right, right. And you have consulted with several organizations in India and the US.
Mhm.
So that I just want to kind of narrow down on what is the difference that you observe? What are the difference or the differences that you observed 20 years ago? Because that is going to be fascinating learning for me also, because I also kind of do corporate trainings and coachings with people in businesses, and I still feel that India is far behind, and maybe even the US is far behind some countries in the Europe, in Europe, which are much more progressive in terms of their the entire concept of human resource itself, I mean, this has been a conversation that has happened in many HR forums where people try to figure whether we should call them human resource or human capital. And I always say to them, why can't we just call them human beings and treat them like human beings rather than treating them
Yes.
like things or resources? And
Yeah.
very few people have an answer to that, because I mean, at the end of the day, every person is seen as an expense account. So what are your thoughts on that, and or what are those basic differences that you noticed?
So, so many years ago, uh, I think the one of the basic differences that you see between the India and US is in terms of culture.
Right, right,
Definitely, here people are all for themselves. It's an individualistic culture. There, it's a collectivistic culture.
right,
There, it is more authoritarian
right,
in the sense that people go where their leaders take them, and here people are more questioning.
right,
However, I think that there is one basic similarity that I want to talk about is that the resistance. Whenever you are about to introduce change,
right.
there is a certain resistance that you face. It doesn't matter which country you are in.
Absolutely.
That resistance
Change
is
always comes with
there.
resistance. Yes, yeah.
Yes, yes. I remember, when I was working in the US with a certain quasi-government organization, they wanted to upskill themselves, update themselves, bring in more, computer technology. This
Right,
was like 20 years ago. That wasn't 25, 20
right,
years ago.
right,
And well, everybody would think everyone wants to go there, right? You
right,
want computers, you want things to be faster, you want, you think it's much easier with
right,
computers. But the
right,
kind of resistance that we faced then was, it was unimaginable. And primarily because, and this is again, we are talking about systems thinking. When you are introducing change, you need to look at the whole system.
absolutely,
And what
absolutely.
they didn't consider was that it was an aging population. The people there in that particular organization were in their 40s and 50s.
Right,
At that age, there's a lot of resistance to picking up new skills.
absolutely,
Now we
absolutely.
know that we can't live without computers, we can't live without the internet.
Right,
So but
right,
then that thinking was not there, and I saw that resistance then there, and I see the resistance later on when I came back to India. So I've
right,
been doing this back and forth between India and
right,
US.
right,
I was working in an organization in India as well, and I could see the resistance there as well. I mean, people would come up with all kinds of excuses about why they did not want to tie up with the top management's goals to
right,
change things.
right.
So I think that that is human nature, to resist the unknown.
Very
And
true.
here comes the shared vision, where you have to actually take people with you
Right,
and also give them the confidence and the security that we're going to help you through this.
right, right. And there's this very old thought which was shared by Peter Drucker.
So it
Where
wasn't the age.
Sorry,
Sorry.
JC, you were saying something?
No, I had a question.
Yes.
Yeah, I was asking, is in India also, was it the age factor which was calling for resistance to change?
That is just one factor, and it's not necessarily always the same factor that is the basis of
Huh.
resistance. But in this particular case that I was talking about, it was age in the US in that case. And in India also, yes, age, as the older you get, there is a certain resistance because you are unsure whether you can manage this. That is one aspect. There are several aspects, regardless of which organization that we are consulting with. There are several aspects that actually come into play, and it depends. Each organization is different, the culture is different, the people they get in are different, so the basis of resistance will be different from organization to organization. So I wanted to just make a final point there. We can't generalize also. I mean, we have got to be careful before we generalize about countries as such.
Right,
I think primarily it depends on the top management, the leaders, their vision for the company, and
right,
how they communicate that vision to
right,
their employees. It,
right,
it will change based on that.
right. And I'm very happy that you brought that up, because I don't think it's about geographies. I mean, I worked with clients all over. I worked in India, I worked with the clients in Europe and the US, and I've realized that in most cultures, it's very boss driven. It's very manager driven, right? They call
Mhm,
themselves leaders, but the entire
mhm,
concept of leadership is not understood. right? Where I always tell them that management is about systems, processes, procedures, policies, etc. And if you don't have good management, you will die today. So management is
Yes.
very important for day-to-day functioning. Management is
Mhm.
hierarchy, right?
Mhm.
But that's not work culture. Leadership is about people, about investing in people, bringing out the best in
Yes.
people. Now, I don't
Yes.
see that in companies in the US. Very few companies in Europe do have that. In India, it's completely missing because the manager's typical way of thinking is it's my way or the highway, right?
Mhm.
And it's mandate driven, it's process driven, it's not driven with this concept of harnessing people's potential. It's purely driven with those quarterly results and half yearly results and
Yes.
annual results. So what you're doing is that, like I use my favorite metaphor with managers just to take the edge away when I tell them what exactly they are. It's like squeezing lemons to get the juice out. So I tell them, all of you are lemons and all of you are lemon juicers because someone's squeezing you and then you're squeezing somebody else in return. And then that becomes the culture of an organization, right? It's not,
Yes.
not a
Yes.
people driven culture, but it's a results driven culture. What are your thoughts
Correct.
on this? And like you said, it's irrespective of geographies.
Yes, I am so glad you brought this up because this is a pet topic for me. It's a
Right.
pet peeve also
Right.
because all the time, and the way I see it is just getting worse and worse with
Right.
people just focusing on the results. And
Absolutely.
there is little concern about the person itself.
Absolutely.
So, organizations, at least top management, has a tendency to assume that the moment a person walks in through the gates of that company, they own them.
Right.
This person has no life beyond the boundaries of the organization.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And as a person, an individual cannot survive unless they have a holistic life. There are
Absolutely.
different aspects to life, there are different phases to life, which is
Absolutely.
where I think this is a point that I try to make in my writings, in my blogs and things like that. Empathy. I think empathy is missing so much in today's organizations. It doesn't matter where it is,
Very true.
everybody is just running madly towards the goal. They don't care who falls by the wayside. Like I told you, this is very close to my heart, which is
Absolutely.
why I yeah. And
I mean,
just to complete the point,
yes.
which is why I am now focusing my course of research and study, and even working with people, is focused on stress management. What
Right.
can people do to manage the stress that is primarily brought on to them because they have goals to meet and they have targets to achieve.
Very true. And Dr. Prabha, as you know, I mean, today this is the first session that we are having in the Rex Karmaveer Global HR Fellowship that we are creating. And through
Mhm.
this, what we are trying to promote is that how do we kind of create this ratings for great organizations that affirm learning, what we are calling as GOAL
Yeah.
ratings, right?
Mhm.
And the entire ratings came about because, I see this great places to work in several organizations, and people in HR love flaunting it.
Mhm.
It's like brownie points for them that I've got great places to work, and they'll proudly put it up on LinkedIn. And I'm like, have you tallied great places to work ratings with what Glassdoor is saying about you? It's very contradicting.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
Yes. So I often wonder what they mean by great places to work. Do they mean that you can come in here and then you can never leave?
Right.
Because if you look at these people, these places, they have a lot of facilities. They accommodate their employees. They have all these various perks.
Right.
And what happens is the employee ends up staying in the organization from 8 in the morning to you don't know how long. And
Absolutely.
then when
Absolutely.
they go back with their laptops and they're still at work.
Yeah, especially in India,
So
where it's considered to be a badge of honor to be working late without realizing that's actually
yes.
counterproductive and not productive.
Yes. So
Yes,
there are 2 points here. The one is what happens to work life balance. Because
right.
if a person is to be mentally well, mentally healthy, the person has to have a complete life. It
True,
cannot be one dimensional.
true.
The second thing is that a long time ago, I mean, this is something that I've thought about very often,
Mm.
but we rarely talk about it. A long time ago, I mean, we all work, the work day is 8 hours, right?
Right, right.
And why did we arrive at those 8 hours? It's because a person legitimately can be effective only for 8 hours.
Absolutely.
Beyond the 8 hours, the brain is, dead or either very tired. you're not really performing to your best.
Right. Right.
So, does that really matter? Does that really work for an organization?
Right.
Are we not really shortchanging both the person and the organization at the same time by compelling them to work around the clock? It
Right.
is my belief that if we have work life balance, people will produce more in those 8 hours than they can if they work for 16 or 18 hours.
Very true. And I'm so happy you
JC
brought.
has a question, as I think.
Yeah, I have a thought here. I said
Uh-huh.
this whole culture about being result oriented in organizations is a reflection of our own culture. Now, if you look outside of the organization, what are we focusing on as social culture? It's about results, it's about achievements, it's about what you own. So, the organization cannot start a change by itself. It's also the people in the organization need to push for that change
Mhm.
outside of the organization also, right?
Yes.
Both
Yes.
inside and out.
Yes. In fact, I was thinking about this last night. So it is, we're talking about it this in terms of organizations because we are all focused on organization development. We work in that field. But what about our schools? What
Yeah,
about our parenting styles?
There
grow
you
up
are.
like, yeah.
There you are. So HR actually should actually start the process of developing leaders from schools. And I'll tell
Yes.
you a little more about what we are doing later, Prabha, because we are actually
Mhm.
going into schools with what we call, Mojo Inspirator is a book that I've written, which is a book on leadership. It's the same lessons that we've been imparting in the corporate world, Fortune 500 companies for the past 17, 18 years. And it's all leadership learning. And I keep telling people that leadership is about human potential, not just about getting them to perform, because the concept is very simple. You unleash people's potential, the performance will be automatic, right? But it somehow doesn't sink into their heads. And I'm so happy that you're speaking and echoing the sentiments which I share in my learning, because you also treat this from a learning angle. And I'm happy that we decided to launch this with someone like you, who is very learning oriented, because the whole idea is that, if you don't have a learning culture, there is no growth in an organization. And yet
Yes.
learning is treated by most people in HR, especially in our geography, as a tick in the checkbox, that these many hours have been done. And those are the kind of briefs you get as a corporate trainer or a coach, that you take them out whitewater rafting and build me great teams. And I'm like, that's like taking the monkey to a L'Oreal salon. Because if you can build great teams with whitewater rafting and outdoor activities, every organization would have a great team, because teams are built on shared values, shared vision. But how's a vision given by any company? It is the CEO along with his few leaders, what they call as the leadership team, who go on to an offsite, create a fancy strategy, and they give it to the people. There's no ownership of the strategy. And I always tell people, it's like sitting in a fancy office in New York or Gurgaon or Nariman Point and creating a strategy for farmers in Maharashtra or Punjab.
Hmm.
Will it work? You don't know the conditions of the soil. So you've not consulted the people who are actually performing and delivering the results, because they are the people in touch with what I call as the grassroots, the frontliners, because they are the ones who are in touch with the market. They are in touch with the customers, and you will not listen to them, because your fancy degree from Ivy League institute or IIM in India gives you the entitled birthright that you are the best at creating a strategy.
Hmm.
Have you
You
faced
know,
this?
absolutely. I mean, like, I have to say that I totally agree with you, uh, because one of the things I consider important for an organization to grow is for the top management to not just take the people along with them, but to listen to the people.
Right.
Listening as a skill, I think, is kind of dead,
Right.
because we listen with our mind. We don't listen, or with our ears. We don't listen with our mind and our heart also.
True.
Because
True.
there is this Chinese,
Symbol.
symbol of listening, which says that you have to listen with your heart and your mind
Yeah.
and your ears as well.
Yes.
So, you are so right in this, because I agree that as the further up the ladder that you go, you actually lose out on that hands-on experience that you can have.
Right.
You actually uh, forget what is involved in the day-to-day nitty-gritties of the job.
Right.
And it's the person who is actually working on the job who knows best how that the whole thing works. how the task is best performed, what is required for them to be successful in that job. So
Right.
therefore, they have to listen to that that person, or have focus group discussions, get opinions, and then make your decisions based on those opinions. Because
Absolutely.
a classic example of this, I remember when I was in management school, when I was doing my PhD, one of the cases that we talked about often was the Challenger in 1986, which blew up a few seconds after it went up into the sky. Apparently there were people at ground level telling the top management that something is not working, something is wrong. However, the top management just shut it down, as often happens, because you want to save time, or you want to have a certain deadline, and you have to meet that deadline. But was it worth it eventually? I mean, that is a classic example, and that is one can never it can never be worse than that, right?
Very true.
Um, Lives were lost, and then of course their project was shut down. So that is something that I think that we need to understand. And this is one more thing that I want to lay on the table, that more and more I think about it, I think everybody should do a course in psychology.
Right.
It is psychology is a life skill. We are not
Right.
born with this. I mean, it's understandable why people don't think about it, because we are not born with this. People
Right.
like us, we have studied the field, and we are fortunate. Maybe some of us also have the instinct to
Right.
understand human behavior
Right.
more precisely than the average person does. So people need to be trained in this aspect also.
And
And
I
I
couldn't
think,
agree with you more. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So
Yes.
just the last point to this part of the discussion is that I think one of the reasons that we miss out on this is because we don't think that HR managers need to have this skill of understanding behavior.
Hmm.
Absolutely true.
If they could just either pick people who are good at this. I mean, there are so
Right.
many tests, personality tests, and things like that. It's not difficult to do that anymore. And if they could also have them trained as part of their orientation, that you need to understand people better. What makes people tick? What makes them motivated? What makes them happy? What makes them satisfied? And how, as a result of that, how will the organization get the best out of them?
Absolutely, because when you invest in people's potential, because people are not only working for money, like and I'll explain that the physical, emotional, spiritual, mental, and the moral aspect of it, because that's another dimension which is missing in many organizations today. Because many managers, to get short-term results, are actually hacking at the roots of the organization and making the organizations weak. Any insights on that from you?
Before that, I
Yes.
have a point I just want to add.
Yeah.
So, when it comes to HR, this whole aspect of understanding at the grassroots level may be kind of absent. But if you take a team which is oriented towards profit, like a marketing team, they never make decisions. I'm seeing more and more the marketing team being involved at the grassroots level because it affects their bottom line. Whereas HR as a department is an expense. So therefore, they don't realize that you need to do the same. The marketing team guys have realized that because it
Right.
affects their bottom line, but the HR guys haven't realized.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
isn't it is also very sad that when
Yeah,
there is
it
cost
is
cutting, HR department or training department is the first thing
the
to
first.
go. That's where the cost cutting starts.
Absolutely.
Whereas I would say that you should beef up that particular department when you're going through a tough time, because you need more skills,
Mm.
more people skills. Um, to answer your point earlier, Jerry, about why do managers just focus on the bottom line, and why do they not take focus more on people and what people want, is I think they're at the bottom of everything, at the base of everything is fear.
Right.
There is a basic fear that if you don't um, if you don't perform, if you don't achieve your targets, if you don't do as a management says, you're out of the job.
True.
And that is a result of us not having a problem solving mentality, a problem
Right.
solving attitude. Because
Right.
anytime something goes wrong, you know, the immediate reaction is to find a scapegoat.
Right.
It's
Right.
not what went wrong, it's not an analysis of what went wrong and what can we do to actually make sure that this doesn't happen in future,
True.
or how can we build on what the mistakes.
Right.
That is never there. It is an instant reaction to save your own skin. So you just quickly point your finger at whoever it is. So what happens as a result? People stop being creative. They
Right.
stop being trying new things. So
Right.
where does innovation go in the organization? Down the drain.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And I completely agree with you. And I have a simple, funny thought to kind of explain this. I always say to err is human, to pass the buck is what they teach you in management, right? That's
Yeah.
what you see.
Yeah.
I mean, and anything which is credit worthy, the credit is taken by the manager, and anything which is going wrong, that is passed on to the to the people who report, the direct reports or subordinates, as they are called in many organizations, which itself by itself is a very subordinate language, right? And you had earlier spoken about how there is a science behind working 8 hours, right? And a lot of research shows you that the average worker actually puts in 3 hours of productive work. Now, there are experiments being done, and countries and companies in Europe are planning to move to 6 hour days and 4 day weeks. And Microsoft did an entire experiment in this live experiment where they actually went for 4 day weeks, so 3 day weekends and 4 day working days. And what they realized is productivity went up by 38%. This is Microsoft,
Wow.
which is a very testosterone driven organization, right?
Mhm.
And when I say testosterone driven organization, they only focus on results and profits.
Mhm.
People and planet is completely missing, right?
Mhm.
uh,
Mhm.
Now I'll just show you a thing, and then this is the 5 intelligence that we speak about in our Mojosh leadership program. And you would see that the 5 intelligence are physical. Physical is big because a person has to survive, you have to live. So you come to work for the pay packet, you come to work because it pays the bills. That's 85% of your workforce worldwide, right? This is a
Yes.
Gallup organization study, right? It's not changed much. It went down from 87% to 85% in the 17th or 18th year of the study in 2017. They started the study in 1999, 2000, right? So it's only gone down by 2%. So what the basic crux of this study shows you is that 85% of people who come to work worldwide, not just in India, worldwide, hate their jobs. Mind the emotion. It's not dislike. They hate their jobs. So it's a very strong emotion. Like I always say, hatred is a much more powerful emotion than love. The love dies out.
Mhm.
People take hatred to their graves. And what is the reason that they hate their jobs? Now, the same organizations are in the great places to work system. So it's completely again very contradicting that 85% of people coming to jobs hate their jobs. Now, the truth is that you join an organization, right? Till you're coming for interviews, you're
Mhm.
coming to the organization for joining and being recruited by the organization. After you
Yeah.
start working for the organization, you don't work for the organization, you work for your manager.
Yeah.
And many managers are making the work culture very toxic, very negative, because they're just purely lemon squeezers. They don't understand human potential. And I completely agree with you that not just people in HR, but people in management should have a crash course in how human psychology works, because that is
Yeah.
what the organizational behavior is all about. Organizational behavior and culture is a manifestation of the collective behavior of the employees in that organization, like a nation. So the first thing is physical intelligence, to live and to survive. The second thing is emotional intelligence. I want to feel like I'm a part of something. I'm part of a family. I'm part of a community. I want to feel loved. I want to
Mhm.
feel respected. Now that's
Mhm.
missing in many places, right? People are
Yes.
not feeling loved. People are not feeling respected. They're just feeling like minions. That is the right word to use. They're minions. The the third thing is mental intelligence, which basically means that am I learning with my manager? Now, while great places to work is a greatly sold concept by the organization, you cannot really have a great place to work because people don't work for places, they work for managers. And no matter how big or small your team, you could even have 100 people team, the HR cannot monitor what the manager is doing with her or his people on a day-to-day basis. But what HR and OD could do is actually kind of percolate a learning culture to the last mile, because that's
Yes.
in their sphere of influence. But unfortunately, in most countries, in most companies, OD reports to HR.
Yes.
And I've always found that to be very, very stifling because HR is so transactional
Mm-hmm.
and OD cannot be transactional.
Yes.
Right. So
Yes.
in a lot of organizations, I propose to clients that why don't you separate the two departments? And they've done it. For example, a company called Invesco, who I work with very closely, HR and OD are two separate divisions. So OD focuses purely on investing in people and harnessing and unleashing people potential because it's all about percolating that learning culture to the last mile.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing which I find very funny, Prabha, is a lot of people, including people in training and the leadership coaching industry,
Mm-hmm.
and I won't name them, but they like to say that we work with the senior leaders and the top bosses. And a lot of times HR people ask me, do you also work with the juniors? And I'm like, aren't they the guys who deliver the results? What is this nonsense? I mean, they are the most important people. It's not the people at the top who are the most important. They are the
Yes.
most important people because they are the result deliverers. The other guys are
Correct.
taking huge pay packages home, no doubt, and they're required. But hey, let's focus on the people who are delivering the results. Don't treat them like minions and just put them in some slipshod learning program just because you have to show some hours of training which have been done. So that's the other sad part, that learning is treated like a checklist. It's very hurtful when you're called for offsites and they bargain with so much to pay your fees as a professional speaker, a leadership coach. But then you see a Himesh Reshamya or a Sonu Nigam singing over there, who they paid lakhs of rupees. And I make it a point to ask them, who is adding value to you, Sonu Nigam or the leadership coach? So the
Yeah.
concept is all wrong. The fourth
Yes.
thing is the spiritual intelligence. I want to leave a legacy. I want to feel like I've made a contribution in this organization. I've created something which I can say was my legacy in this organization. Most of the times, people's ideas are not accepted. They're not even listened to, like you said, because listening is not only a forgotten art; it's a science which most people don't understand. That listening is not about hearing. Listening is
Yeah.
about complete rapt attention. The Chinese symbol says listen with a virtuous heart. And that's what
Correct.
the Columbia University experiments show you, that only 7% of listening is verbal and vocal. 93% of listening is non-verbal language. And the last thing is moral intelligence. I don't want to compromise my values. Now, in a lot of organizations, to meet those quarterly results, this is the typical language which managers get it done. I don't care how you get it done. Jugaad lagao. Kara do. I want to see the results. Now, what is the messaging that you're giving to your people? You're telling them
Mm-hmm.
get it done by hook or by crook. So then I'm not feeling good about myself because I've compromised my values. Now, this person is not holistically healthy. So how do you expect her or him to be productive? What are your thoughts on this, ma'am?
Well, there's so many interesting thoughts over there. In fact, I agree with everything that you've said. It's a very interesting theory that you have put up there that you talked about just now. Um, Actually, I think it is. We can. It's not as straightforward as it might seem to people. There are
Right,
so many things involved over here.
right.
First of all, we are talking about all these people in organizations, and we are wondering why they can't see that the person is important,
Hmm.
why they cannot take the person's feelings, emotions, needs into consideration. Why is it just always why is success always based on organizational goals?
Right,
So I think there are two things that I want to put on the table there. One is that, first of all, the evaluation system.
right,
The evaluation system is always focusing on who's the best,
right,
who has the, who has makes the most profits.
right,
That company is number one.
right,
Has it ever asked for, the human satisfaction index or a human happiness index to list the company as number one? No, we
right,
don't do that, do we?
right,
Secondly, when we talk about managers and leaders who don't focus on people, look at what's happening in our schools. How often is a child who asks difficult questions to the teacher appreciated?
right,
Never. I would say never. I mean, it's a very rare teacher that appreciates. Again, it's what the teacher focuses in on as required by the school management.
right,
So you
right,
want to complete the portions, you want to get things done, you want to drive people to get the highest marks. But what happens to the person who questions what you're teaching in class. I think that
Absolutely.
is the person you need to focus on. So
Right.
from the childhood, both in our schools and in society, and even in our homes, unfortunately, children are taught not to question.
I like what you're
No?
saying. Please go
Yes.
ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So children are taught not to question, and we've all heard this growing up. Children should be seen and not heard.
Right.
So if you have questions, and what happens? You kind of just suppress those questions, and over time, you stop asking questions.
Right.
So that is
Absolutely.
one thing that we are doing to our kids, and
Right.
later on to the employees in the organizations. So, first of all, they stop asking questions.
Right. Very nice.
Secondly, they just follow, they're like sheep. They're told from the childhood that you just have to follow what your manager says, what it dictates. And we have something called an authoritarian personality in India that I have read a lot about, having, and this is again, we are going back to culture and to what has happened to India. And that's why I said it's not as easy as it seems, because we really have lots of baggage that we bring as part of a culture and as part of a country that has been suppressed so
Right.
often by so many
Right.
conquerors. We've
Right.
had so many people invading and suppressing. So over time, what has happened to the Indian personality is that we've developed what is called an authoritarian personality, which means that when you're in power, you are autocratic,
Right.
you know, you are a
Absolutely.
dictator.
Right.
But the moment you are a subordinate,
Right.
then you just toe your boss's line. You don't ask questions.
Right.
So it's like, boss is God.
Right. Absolutely.
So this is something that we are dealing with, and we will see this everywhere we go, that the moment when people are bosses, their whole nature changes.
Right.
They don't want to know what the people below them, their employees, their subordinates, their team members are
Right.
thinking
Right.
about, what they can contribute,
Right.
unless you ask a person, what are you going to contribute to this particular mission or vision.
Very true.
And this person is not going to know. And just
Absolutely.
to complete that point, in many of the organizations that I've worked, when there are strategic planning workshops, and you ask them what's the vision of your company, very often they don't know.
Right.
And even if we put it up on a PPT slide, they don't identify with it.
Very true.
So, what companies forget to do is to update their vision and their mission based with the times, the changes in going around them in society. So we have to keep. It's not just the employee who is to blame here. We can't
Right.
blame the employee. Employee comes in with a certain personality, with a certain amount of skill, and that person needs to be developed
Further.
to make an impact further. Yes, by the
Absolutely. Absolutely.
managers.
And that's
Um,
exactly what we call as investing in people, the human potential.
yes,
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
yes,
I
yes,
completely agree with you, ma'am, on all
yes,
counts. In fact, I start all my leadership workshops and talks in organizations, whether it's a gathering of 50 people or a gathering of 50,000 people. I start by saying, great parents make great leaders. And then I tell them the unfortunate part of the world is that very few great parents, loving parents, many, great parents
yes,
very few, right? Because great parents are people who don't enforce their thoughts onto their children. Now those loving parents are the same parents who are coming to work, and that autocracy is built into our DNA, that
yes,
we think we
yes,
know it all. We will tell our
yes.
children what to do. And this is actually from my book, because I'm
Mhm.
working with people in the corporate culture. They've been asking me, why don't you start parenting skilling programs? And I'm actually
Yes,
doing that. So it's the making of a book. In this book, which is stories of kids, I just have around 155 parenting skills. I'm expanding on that and making it into a book now. The second thing is, you're absolutely right. Whether it's the modern education system in the US or India or at home, the learning is being completely kind of stifled. So I'll just give the example of the school where our children go. Our
mhm,
eldest son Zoravar is very good with maths. He kind of eats, drinks, sleeps maths, right?
mhm.
So he can do maths, like, when he's dozing off, right? And he asks questions. So in class 6 or 7, one of his teachers tells us in the PTM, and I normally keep silent in the PTM because I don't want to kind of influence people with my thoughts. And she says to us, uh, your son should be trained not to ask too many questions. He spoils the decorum of the class. And I normally, like I said, I keep quiet, because then, if I say something which is amiss, then I'll also get scolding at home from my say and a
Mhm.
half, right?
Mhm.
So I couldn't stop myself, and I said to her, "Ma'am, isn't that how the genius of Albert Einstein was unleashed?" Because he writes in his autobiography, autobiography, that I have no particular genius. All I do is ask questions. And you're stopping my son from asking questions. Now, same school, like you said, you cannot generalize a geography, you cannot generalize organization also. In the same school, next year we meet another maths teacher who tells us Zorawar asks us such brilliant questions that sometimes I wonder whether I know my maths properly. So it all depends on what that, so we can come
Yes.
from a feudal
Yes.
culture. India is a feudal culture, but it all depends on the choices I make as a leader about how do
Yes.
I want to work and relate and connect with people. And yes, the problem of the world is 90% of the world is herd mindset, like you said. They're
Mhm.
sheep, they're just being herded
Mhm.
along. So their
Mhm.
productivity is like, completely, I mean, absolutely low. It's not high. It's not high productivity. And like I always tell people, that if you're not engaged in what you're doing, then how can you engage your teams? How can you engage your
Yes.
direct reports? Now, here's an insight for you, ma'am. Only 12% of people worldwide know the vision, mission, values of their organization, what the strategic goals
I'm
of
not
the organization
surprised.
are. Only
Mhm.
12%. Only 5% know at any given time exactly where they stand on them. These are the
Yes.
people who we call the high pots or the high hypers. But the point
Mhm.
is, you cannot just focus on the high pots and the hypers, because you need to move the other mass towards becoming high pots
Yes.
and the hypers, because otherwise you'll burn them out also. And that has become the culture of most of these organizations, which are great places to work. And that is why we
Yeah.
felt that it is very essential to kind of, introduce this concept of great organizations that affirm learning goal, as we call it. I'm just going to show you another slide, which is
Yeah.
from Peter Senge's book. And I'm
Mhm.
sure you're familiar with Peter Senge's work.
Yeah.
It's I'm just going to read from the slide, if you see over
Mhm.
here.
Mhm.
And the central theme of Peter Senge's fifth discipline is the fact that it is no longer sufficient for an organization to rely upon just one person or few people in the leadership team or management to learn for the organization. A successful organization is one that can effectively develop the capacity for members to learn at all levels of the organization. But unfortunately, that is not being done. What are your thoughts on this, ma'am? How do you think we can kind of influence people in OD to take learning more seriously and not just use it like a tick in the checklist? What are your insights, and what are the thoughts and ideas for action that you have to influence people to kind of make learning an essential part of the culture?
Um, first of all, I think people need to keep in mind, especially OD. I mean, I'm sure people working in OD do understand this. Uh, but I think it's important to understand that you can get people into the door of the organization by the salary you give them, and the security, give them a contract for a year or two, and all of that. Going back to Maslow's need hierarchy.
Absolutely.
So, but after a point, if you want the person to stay in your organization, you have to offer personal growth. And
Right.
personal growth can be anything that the employee defines. It
Right.
has to be an employee's definition of what personal growth means to him or her.
Right.
You cannot define what growth is going to be for them because
Right.
they have their personal values, they have their personal goals, and you have to respect that.
Right.
That is one of the key factors for for promoting learning in an organization, and people are going to understand that.
Absolutely.
People are savvy. I honestly believe in good faith that people know what's good for them,
Absolutely.
but
Absolutely.
they don't know how to go out and get that, especially in
Company.
organizations which will not encourage questioning, which will not encourage going off at a tangent in a different path,
Right.
maybe eventually for the benefit of the organization.
Right.
What I think people at the top and HR people need to understand is that any learning that they foster
Right.
is going to benefit the organization
Right.
eventually.
Right.
The learning that they foster can take the organization to a different level in a different direction.
Very
and
true.
and one thing we also must keep in mind that there is so much change happening.
Right.
Organizations need to change, they need to grow, they need to develop if they have to stay relevant.
Very true.
And that can only happen when they engage their employees.
Very true.
We cannot just say, you know what, I think I know that this, I had this beef with an organization that I worked with. I won't name the organization. They wanted certain training programs because the CEO thought that that is what worked for the organization. I said, what about a needs analysis? Don't you want to
Right.
do a need analysis and find out what exactly the people need to
Right.
achieve their goals, achieve their work objectives?
Right.
So it was like, no, the CEO wants this, so you better do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it is that kind of thinking. So what makes, I mean, if people at the top, and this is where emotional intelligence comes in, and I
Absolutely.
think Daniel Goleman's, he's got also this model of leadership, which says that there are so many different types of leadership, and that there is no leadership um, model that works in all situations.
True.
You've got to change your leadership style based on the situation you are in or based on the stage of the organization development.
Very true.
So people at the top need to understand this. Like this, unfortunately, I know you, I mean, I do understand what you mean when you say that people get trained in all these fancy institutes. But when they come into an organization, they've got to be ready to roll up their sleeves and understand what is going on in that particular organization.
Very true.
You
Very true.
cannot generalize across organizations. And I am very, I'm like, I feel very strongly about, somebody coming in from outside, having worked at a certain model of development and just coming and enforcing that in another organization simply because it works somewhere else. You
Right.
don't know what this organization is about. You don't know
I
how the people
completely agree
are,
with you.
where they come from. So
Completely.
I think it is very important for people to understand what the organization does, how it works, what kind of people work there, which region are they coming from, what kind of culture. There is so much that goes into it. It
Very
is
true.
it is simply not a superficial thing.
Right. Thank you so much, Prabha. I mean, brilliant insights. And before I pull in JC to discuss more about the great organizations
Mhm,
that affirm learning goal ratings with you, I'm going to just show you a slide which will
mhm,
completely kind of echo with what you're saying. What has been identified by research done across by think tanks from across the world is that the three most essential skills of the future are learning to learn, empathy, and emotional intelligence. And I always say humans are born with empathy, but the more we achieve, the more arrogant we become, and the apathy then grows and the empathy gets dissolved, right? And
yes.
this is from my book. It's called The Mojo Inspirator: Life, Leadership, and Learning to Learn Lessons. And we're
Mhm,
actually rolling this out in schools and colleges now. And the Mojo Inspirator book, the title is two coined words. Mojo Inspirator are three mindsets, and that's the title of the book. And it basically is character rooted learning, right? That you cannot enjoy the fruits or the results of an organization for long if the roots, the foundation, the relationships with people are not strong, right? And that's the essential learning goal. And we bring the stories and the leadership concepts to life with very simple stories of ordinary people who've gone for extraordinary by harnessing their potential, like Dashrath Manji, the mountain man, the man who moved a mountain, or William
mhm,
Kamkwambe, the boy who harnessed
yeah,
the wind, the movie which is very popular. So he's featured
yeah.
in the book, right? And I started researching him way back around 10, 12 years ago. And then we focus on the five intelligences. That if you're not focusing on the mental, moral, emotional, physical, and spiritual health of the individual, then that individual's competency and productivity cannot be very high. And the idea is that it has to percolate down to the last level, because the person in the last mile are the people who actually deliver the results. And then we cover the whole learning that you spoke about. And the central theme of the book is evolving mindful consciousness, and that's the framework that we've created. And it starts where we explain to leaders why it is very important for them to understand that vulnerability, that's the zero mindset, zero virtue, and zero power. So I've divided the book into three mindsets, seven virtues, and 21 powers. And that if you practice this in the right way, then you rewire your brain to unleash your potential. And the zero mindset, virtue, and power is vulnerability. Now, most people
Fascinating.
most people in organizations don't like to be vulnerable. They think
Yes.
vulnerability is weakness, and I tell them that that is your power. Because when you understand vulnerability, you keep an open mind to listen to other people's ideas. It's not your way or the
Yeah.
highway. It doesn't work like that,
Yeah.
right? Because teams are built on trust, not in games people play at offsites. And that trust is missing in
Absolutely.
an organization because of
Absolutely.
the insecurities. Because the higher you go, the more your insecurity grows with you, because you're only trying to safeguard your
Yeah.
position and title and
Yeah.
chair and pay packet. And then you're playing games, different games in the organizations. So you're great teams at the offside, but in the organization you're playing games which people play in the petty games that people play, trying to
Yes.
outdo each other. So that is where
Yeah.
we come in. And my final question to you is, you are doing a lot of work on mindfulness. And the reason I ask this is because in India, suddenly this entire mindfulness space has started getting invaded. And then, you have all the
Mhm.
fly by night operators who actually
Yes.
spoil it for all of us by going with half baked concepts without really understanding. What would you say is the concept of mindfulness in a few words? And what does a mindful leader really do?
Um, Wow, that's a thank you for asking this question, because I feel very strongly about all the stress that people are going through today, simply because of the way of life. The
Right,
life that we live. We have social media that is just bombarding you with various pieces of information. We have people wanting to look good and therefore doing certain things on social media, which makes others pressured to do the same things. So it just goes on and on and on. I think a very simple thing, and this is what most people don't know about being mindful and being in the moment, means that you're giving that particular moment your best. You
right,
are there, whole
right.
and soul.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
So when you are there completely without being distracted by your phone, or without being distracted by what's going to go on, what you're going to go back and do at home in the evening, or whatever it is, um, you are able to give that particular issue or problem that you're dealing with the best solution.
Right,
So
absolutely.
that is one point, that you are fully present
Right,
there. The
right,
second point is that, and this is the reason why I am just so fascinated by this study, is that you can actually rewire your brain.
right,
you know
right,
a lot of us, a lot of what's going on around us now is making us very emotionally vulnerable.
right,
People
right.
just do not think. They just give into their emotions and then get carried away by it and then regret it. And
Absolutely,
then
absolutely,
the levels of anxiety and depression that are going on in the world, they're just escalating. So
absolutely.
I think it's very important to know that you can actually take hold of this situation yourself
True,
by just being mindful, by practicing meditation. And
absolutely,
like in the US also, you have mindfulness is a big thing. They're actually appropriating it from India, because this
absolutely,
thing
absolutely.
have grew in India.
it's
So
it's our
now it is
concept, it's our
everywhere.
concept, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And I like the work which Thich Nhat Hanh has done on this. And
Yes.
I had the opportunity to speak with him in a mindfulness summit a few years ago. And exactly what you said, I actually used a scene from a movie called The Adventures of Walter Mitty. And
Mhm.
I don't know if you've seen the movie. I happened to see the movie in a
I
flight
haven't.
around
Hmm.
7 8 years ago. And that one scene, I didn't like the movie at all. It was not not something which was my kind of a movie. But there's one scene in the movie where Sean Penn, who's got a cameo performance in the movie, and he's this guy who takes pictures of wildlife and nature, and sells it to magazines. So he's a freelancer. And there's this one picture of his, which Walter Mitty, which is who played by Ben Stiller. And Ben Stiller, wants to find him and tell him that, I want to give you an offer for this picture because we want to use it on the last cover of the last printed magazine that we are publishing. So he tries to find him at home, can't find him, and then he finally discovers that he's somewhere in the mountains because he's
Hmm.
out there to shoot some wildlife. And he actually stumbles upon him when he finds him in the mountain. And Sean Penn asks him, "What are you doing here?" And he says, "I've come to discuss and negotiate the price for this picture with you." And he says, seriously. And he says, you can't disturb me right now because I've been waiting here for the past 2 days trying to spot a snow leopard. My camera is trained on that spot, and the snow leopard is going to appear there soon. And the snow leopard appears there. And then, because he just doesn't want to savor the experience alone, he wants him to share it. He says, come watch it. It's a once in a lifetime moment. And Walter Mitty, played by Ben Stiller, sees it and says, hey, he's about to move out, take a picture fast. And he tells him, what makes you think I want to take a picture? It's here.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what we've captured in the book. We call it evolving mindful consciousness, which means that, are you continuously evolving by learning and growing every day, and are you mindful about helping others also to learn? And that's where the title Mojo Inspirator comes in. So thank you so much, Prabha. I really enjoyed my conversation with you. I'm so happy to see that we are so like-minded. And more than that, I'm so happy that we decided and chose to launch with you. That is what we had discussed with JC when she spoke about you, that, hey, let's get her to launch it, because she's in the learning space, and she's focused on human potential rather than just treating human beings like things and resources.
Yeah.
So we are so glad that we had you to kind of do the first talk with us, and it's been an absolute honor and privilege talking to you. And we would surely like to involve you in the ratings and the work as we go forward as a part of our learning circle. So we're calling everything, we have not called it a steering committee or an advisory committee, we've just called it a learning circle, which is people from the corporate world, from organizations who can contribute to the rating. So over to you, JC, for any
Well,
of
thank you,
your...
Jerry. I have to just take a moment to thank you. It has been fascinating conversation for me also, and also a forum to air, all the various thoughts that I've had all these years. It was coming together of so many things. So thank you. I
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
your time and the fact that you invited me to be part of the first OD conference or meeting or whatever you call it. And thanks to JC
Thank you so much.
for
It's completely our privilege for all of us at the Rex Karmaveer Global Fellowship Mission, and for Tangram, who are our partner, JC and Avinash, who have actually put this entire research and ratings together. So they are the basic drivers of this, and we are just kind of working together to make this happen so that we can have better learning cultures in most
yes.
organizations. So over to you, JC.
Okay. Yeah. Prabha, I have just two questions. So we started with saying, can we refer to people as human beings, right? So that term, does it resonate today in organizations, or is it still human resource, or are those the terms that are being used, or can we use
Well,
something?
I think these days everybody prefers to be called person because there are so many aspects involved in it today. There are the diversity aspects that we also need to be aware of. So we generally talk about people and persons. So I think while human resources is not, I don't see it being widely used anymore. We just call them employees or people. So I think that's probably the best way to go about it, in my opinion.
Okay, so there is a change in terminology then.
Yes.
So
In
the
general, we try not to refer to human beings, or it just becomes too generalized then, and we prefer to be more personalized.
okay, so we are using some of the attributes that we use in market research, because we typically understand a person holistically, because that's where the money is, and we go after understanding people in a much deeper way. So therefore, the first question in this survey is about establishing their motivation. So if you see, there are
Mhm.
6 statements which talks about their people's motivation based on Halen's model. So we establish the person as in terms of what drives them, what are their motivations towards working in an organization or towards working in general. So that's very different from what a typical HR would do. So that's the kind of so how do you think that will work in the survey?
So let me see if I've understood this right. So you want to start with questions about motivations
Yes.
to the people who are working in the
Yeah.
organizations. Could
Of course,
you give me an example?
we've simplified it. Typically, to establish a person's motivation, It's a rather long drawn exercise. It takes at least about 15 minutes with the use of projectives, etc. But that's in a qualitative format. In a quant format, we are looking at motivation with a simple statement. So, like I work, my role at the organization is about completing a task or achieving something, as compared to my work at the organization is about exploring my potential, or as compared to my work at the organization is about showing people the status I own, or that I'm working as a part of a great organization. So what is it that drives them to be working in a specific organization? It could be status, it could be experience related, it could be about basic physical needs, it could be about providing for your family. So these are the motivations. There are there are eight motivations, and we establish that first, and then go on to understanding how they rate the organization. So does
Yeah, I
that?
think that yes, I think that sounds like a good approach because I think that a person's perspective will determine how they view the organization.
Yes,
And to get that perspective first
yes.
would definitely be more helpful because it'll help you understand why they are saying those specific things about the organization.
Because I know this is not a typically done
Yeah.
in
It is
an
not,
HR
but I
role.
think it
Like
kind of it starts at the very base because you
hmm,
are trying to understand the person first
yes,
before you get their views on the organization. So I think that might be valuable.
yeah.
That will definitely be valuable.
So our stand is, let's establish the humanness of the person and then go on to understanding how he views the organization. So that's the way to
Yes,
start.
yes. I think that's a very good approach.
Okay. And any other attributes that come to your mind which we need to take care of in this survey, besides, anything else that we need to look at? Any other?
I think that the world is very different today than it was when all those theories came about. So we have to, I think, understand that motivations might be a little different today from what they were a few years ago. Also, things would change from depending on the generation. Gen X is different from Gen Y,
Hmm.
um, and the millennials. I think things would be very different there. So I think a couple of questions to understand what the level at which the person is, whether they're Gen Y or Gen X or millennials, and what motivates them would probably be helpful to understand how they think, because I think it would be very different from generation to generation.
Oh, so that we would do
So
on an analysis level by looking
mhm,
at different age groups and analyzing them
yeah, yeah.
through that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I think the basic thing is I think most of these theories still work today.
Hmm.
Whether it's Hertzberg's theory or any other Maslow's need hierarchy, I think the basis is the foundation for anything that has come up today. So I think if we start there, I think that's a good base,
Oh,
good place to start.
great. That's all from me. Yeah, others we've already discussed the questionnaire, I know. So that's all.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well,
So lovely.
thank you both so much.
Lovely. Thank you, JC.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And I think we have some great parameters and insights in the rating program itself, which will help people to think about how to create a great learning culture so that culture can truly eat strategy for breakfast. And thank you, Prabha, ma'am, for all your
Yeah,
insights.
you're
It's
welcome.
really enriched my learning also. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for involving me.
Thank,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Have a
Take
great day.
care.
Bye-bye. See you.
Yeah,
Bye.
you too. Bye.
Thank you, JC. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Nishan. Bye-bye.